Hi everyone, welcome to Casual Watch Talk Live on a Tuesday. Welcome everyone in the chat. Nice to see you, Bill. Thanks for being first in the door. Well, I'm going to introduce my panel. I've got Mark from On Liberty 1859 on Instagram, Patrick from Pocket Watch Time, and then
Hey, everybody.
Steve from Red Bar Austin. So thanks for joining us, panel. Should we kick it off with a wristwatch check? Steve, do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, sure. So I don't mean to steal your thunder, but I think we might be talking a little bit about vintage watches at some point. And so I do have a vintage watch on my wrist here. It's a little bit hard to see, but let's see. This is a Breitling long playing chronograph that I picked up a few years ago, and it's from the early 1970s. And so yeah, haven't worn it in a while. It's a big hunk of gold, and so I thought, you know what, I'm just going to wear it today. It's a special occasion. Why not?
Yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah, is that one that's got a really cool back story to it? Maybe we'll have to cover that at some point.
Yes, it is.
Like new old.
So it was basically new old stock, and I won't go into a lot of detail, but yeah, it's basically a new old stock watch that I purchased a few years ago, and yeah, there is an interesting story behind it, but we'll save it for another time.
Yeah, that would be a really good episode on like buying new old stock watches. So Patrick, what are you wearing?
Well, I've actually got two watches on the wrist today. I'm wearing a old pocket watch. I've got my Vortic watch conversion on, and my odd watch for the day is I've
nice.
I've got my little guy here holding the little bun strap watch that I made, the little trench watch. Because the coolest thing is a coworker of mine made me this 3D printed hand, and I'm like, this thing's absolutely awesome. And I kind of asked him if he wanted to go into quasi business making some metal or some plastic hands for people, but he said no. He goes, I just wanted to make it for fun. And
well,
I'm so probably going to buy a 3D printer one of these days because this thing is so. I mean, it's rugged. It's really good. I didn't realize the quality was that good.
Well, yeah. Well, on the back of the Wednesday show and Netflix, I mean, they'd be massive, wouldn't they, with Thing? If you painted the scars on and stuff like that, maybe now's the time. This is the $1 million idea. Plus, you can wear it in your sleeve, can't you, when you're out and accidentally just your hand falls off.
Absolutely.
Mark, what are you wearing? You're on mute. I'll unmute you.
Thank you, sir. I have an Oris Aquis Mark 1.
Oh, nice.
My first proper Swiss watch.
Wow. Did it come on that strap, or did you get it on the bracelet?
Yeah, this is the Oris rubber strap. Probably the worst aspect of the watch. The strap is intended for somebody with a 10-inch wrist wearing two wetsuits. So I've had to cut it down. It's on its smallest setting. It's been cut twice, and it's still too long.
Yeah, I'm always so nervous when you've got to adjust you've actually got to cut the rubber on those straps sometimes, not on the Oris ones, but I've had one. I forget which one I did last time, but yeah, I had to actually cut the strap. And then the Breitling one's always funny, isn't it? Because you have to cut it, and if it's got the lettering on the outside, you end up with just a portion of the Breitling name. Well, I'm wearing my Seiko speed timer today. I've tried it on some. I was so critical of the bracelet on the previous speed timer. I never put it on the bracelet, but I've been swapping this out, trying it on different straps, and I actually quite like the bracelet. But I'll do a little bit of an unboxing as well while we're here, because I got sent a watch in for review. It's other YouTubers have reviewed this, but this is this I think it's Sega Designs, and it's the World Watch. I'm probably not showing it very much, but it's got a globe in the center, and you basically the globe revolves around. So this is a picture of the watch. The globe evolves around, so the compass is actually pointing at the time. So here it's 10, and then the inner ring rotates as well as the minute track. So here it's actually 10 past 10. So it actually, once you get used to it, if you're just looking in a straight line, it tells you the time straight away. It's quite an interesting watch. So I'll be doing a review of that one coming up.
Cool.
shortly, but the Zodiac review will definitely be out this week. The Zodiac that I've been doing, I'm just finishing off the review. I'll get somebody to check it over and then I'll launch it. Well, today we're going to talk about watches. Speaking of Zodiac, we're going to talk about watches that have their anniversaries this upcoming year, 2023, or this year, 2023. Because the Zodiac Seawolf didn't make it on this list, but the Zodiac Seawolf, which was made in 1957, has an anniversary this year. But monochrome watches. Well, I'll tell you what, Patrick. Do you want to introduce it? Because you actually came up with the. You came up with
Yeah,
the
I mean,
article.
I've been working my butt off this week. I did 4 days, and I do 4 days after. So today's my only day off, and I had just enough time to pretty much go online to see this kind of neat article. And the real one that caught my attention was the new Blancpain that's coming out. And then they sort of use that to privy into all of these other sort of anniversaries. And I just thought it was kind of an interesting article because every year we get new anniversaries, and sometimes watch brands take advantage of it and give us some new things, and sometimes they just let them fall away. I know it's a really big Rolex anniversary, so are we going to get something this year, or are they just going to ignore it like they have in years past? Only time will tell.
Exactly. Yeah, it is it's the Daytona, isn't it, that's this year. But what I thought might be interesting is if we go through some of the watches, and it's amazing to me how many of them are there's modern versions of them. So if we go through the article, talk about the watch, and then we'll look at the modern one, and then perhaps give an opinion on whether we still think it should be something that's kept, a model that should have kept going, and what we think of it. But well, let's start with the Seiko Laurel. So this is a 110 years old watch. So does anybody know the background on this watch? Patrick, do you know much about it, or Steve, do you know much about it?
I do. It's it's pretty much the first Seiko wristwatch, and kind of in theme of that, that's what I put this one on thing for the day, because this really was Seiko's first trench watch, and the original has a hunter case back because it pretty much was a pocket watch movement that they attached onto a leather strap, and because of it, it was very small in size. I think it was 36, maybe even 34 millimeters, and it's just sort of the first invention of a pilot's watch. Has the classic red 12, and this year they made a recreation, and some people absolutely love it and some people absolutely hate it.
Yeah, I guess before we go into that, has anyone seen this watch, or has anyone got an opinion, Steve or Mark?
I've seen pictures of it. I have to say, I do not like the strap that they have it pictured on here. The one that Patrick has on his dismembered hand is the absolute right strap that it should go on. I mean, like when you think of a classic trench watch, you think of like this smaller circular watch that is like a multi-piece leather that's larger than a Bund. Bund typically has like it's like a curved piece of leather, but this is almost like a cuff that similar to like what you'd see a lot of people wearing for fashion in the 1970s. It's a very similar design, and my interpretation as well is it was just an early trench watch, probably designed around the First World War, when trench warfare was obviously how that war was fought primarily. So a very, very cool piece. Never seen one in person, but it would be great to see Seiko expand on this more, for sure.
I mean, I saw it and I said, that's a pocket watch on a strap. You can definitely see its origins. I can imagine it with soldered lugs. Just put it on a strap. That's a pocket watch on a strap.
Yeah, because
a little smaller, yes, but
yeah,
and if it's 110 years old, a couple of years before World War One, 1912, but you can see where the idea of soldering lugs onto pocket watches came from in this design.
Yeah. Well, let's have a quick look now, because they have re-released this watch now, or they're going to be re-releasing it. Fratello's did a really good article. So they've got the vintage one on that we just took a look at, but this is the new one. And Patrick, you had this on one of your. We did a recent video, didn't you? And you talked about this one of the recent live streams.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't remember exactly what the topic was, but yeah, it might have just been a new hit or miss because it just sort of fell out and to the marketplace about 2 weeks ago. And I guess that's where you figure out whether you like it or you dislike it. And I think they did a really good reimagining of it because I think they made it a little bit larger in size. They put it into their Presage line, which is nice. I think they actually did a pretty nice job with a recreation of the strap. The only sort of buzzkill for me is that instead of making it a true small seconds watch, they kept it a center seconds, but they made the date the small seconds at 6. And to me, that just makes it confusing. So, I would look at this watch all the time and I'd probably looking down at the date and be like, why isn't my seconds hand moving? But it's the date. And, and then it's got a little power reserve indicator, which I'm fine with. That's pretty subtle. But yeah, now it went from having few hands like the original to just way too many hands. So they should have done some sort of recreation or a new movement or something to really give this watch proper credit, in my opinion.
It's very busy now, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so Jack's asking, yay or nay on the red 12. I mean, I quite like it.
I do too.
100% yay.
100% like it.
I'm curious why did they come up with that in the first place?
So the red 12, it was really just to get your attention and show you pretty much where the top was. Because if you kind of recall, these are tiny little. Well, that's not focusing. But you've got tiny little watches, and usually the 12 was red, and sometimes the 12 was even bigger. And so that way, just at a quick glance, you could see where the top of your watch was. Because you also have to think that a lot of these trench watches weren't necessarily oriented like a normal watch. So like my trench watch here, it's sideways. So for you to find the 12, you actually have to look over here. And so it pretty much gives you a quicker orientation.
Good luck if you're colorblind, right?
Absolutely.
And then is this? I mean, if this is another version of it, a more kind of. Okay. So this is one from. I quite like that. This is one from 2016. It says with the L'Oreal inspired dial.
Mm-hmm.
I actually don't mind the look of that, to be honest. But yeah. Okay. Well, next up we had the Omega Seamaster 1948. So this is 75 years. So this is those, and this is a current model, and because I thought this was the new model, but those are the originals. But the new one looks like this, and they did do a small seconds version of it as well, but I couldn't find it on Omega's website for whatever reason. And I think it's this version that also Daniel Craig is wearing in the new Glass Onion film as well. But what does everyone think on this one?
I love them personally. I think I've owned a couple of the original ones that are similar to these, and I think they are just so beautiful and understated. And I'm all for it. I think it's a design that doesn't really look a lot like a Seamaster, and to me, that's part of the appeal of it. Is that the more modern Seamasters don't look anything like this, and so that's part of the big reason why I like it so much. I think it's a really clean design, and it kind of has real fat lugs on it, and so it's a real kind of masculine design as well. And so I've always been a fan of these, and you can still buy them used, I feel like, for a pretty good price.
Yeah, very Art Deco, aren't they? The cases, even though it was in the 40s.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I mean the Seamaster design sort of was a dressier watch until they made the big commitment to sporty in 1993, and then becoming the Bond watch in 1995. There were Seamaster DeVille watches at some point, so for a long time it was a dressier rather than a sporty watch. Those are very nice. I like those. Not sure I'd ever buy one, but you'd stand and drool if you saw them in the boutique.
Yeah, I've definitely I've seen this one that had the small seconds. I don't know why I can't find it on their website at the moment, but I've seen this one. So this is the coaxial now, the $6,400, which on a steel, I don't know, maybe seems a little rich for my blood. I would probably go with one of the other Seamaster models, but they've certainly kept very true to the design. It's almost an exact sort of homage of it, exact replica, but just
I
with
mean,
modern components.
that's $1,000 more than a 300M on a bracelet.
Hmm.
So that's quite a lot.
It is quite a lot, yeah, it is. So let's move on to the next one. I just got to show this comment. Thanks, Aaron, for watching. We made a little joke about a Bomber Mercier, and Aaron let us know that you just bought one. So sorry, Aaron. We were only kidding around on the last live stream. You wear it in good health. I've heard that they are very good, very well made. Next one up here then is the mighty Blancpain 50 Fathoms. So this one is hitting its 70 years. So the same as the Seawolf and the same as another very famous watch that is coming on here. 1953 seemed to be an excellent year for the dive watches. But, well, who wants to take this one? Steve, have you ever owned a 50 Fathoms? I know you've had quite a collective.
I actually do. I do have a Blancpain, but it's rebranded as a Waltham, and it's a much later model than this. And I actually inherited it from my dad. So it's a Bathyscaphe model from the late 60s. But I mean, if you're going to own one Blancpain, this is the model, in my opinion. I mean, it's just an absolute icon, and I mean, such a beautiful piece. And I think Helson a few years ago made sort of an homage to this, and I mean, even their version of it looks so good. You know, this is just one of these designs that's never going to go out of style, and I think this is just an incredible looking piece. And it's got kind of a curved, crystal on it as well, and I think that really just adds to the depth. There's a lot of depth with this. You know, you've got that sort of bakelite bezel and the curved plexi crystal and the yellow lume and the black. It's just, man, just an amazing looking piece.
I think for a long time the 50 Fathoms sort of disappeared, and it's had a revival with the micro brands copying it. It's got to be one of the, everyone's copying a certain Rolex model, but then there's been a lot of very close homage to the Blancpain 53, from the 1953. Recently, it's been a very popular watch in the micro brand and value end. The Christopher Ward C65 is a very close copy, just as an example, and there are many, many more. So it's had a revival at the hands of others, and it's a really nice watch on its own too.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. They have I was just trying to find a modern version of it. I guess this would be the closest modern version that you can buy, but they have released ones very similar to this original one, haven't they? Very similar to that original one, and some with the radioactive symbol on them because of the. Would that be because of tritium, or was that they weren't? Yeah, weren't. Radium, but yeah, you're right. It's a borrowed design, isn't it? A lot of people are using it, and I think because it's just such a classic look. I've always liked the 50 Fathoms, but I just find them a little rich for my blood. Again, a little bit expensive. Not expensive like when I've held them, when I've handled them, it doesn't feel like I don't know. It didn't feel like it was a $15,500 watch to me.
Yeah,
I mean,
and I kind of agree with you on that one. That's the part that's sort of the buzzkill is, it really is much more of a designer watch than, let's say, its Rolex counterpart. But the part that's kind of getting funny these days is with Rolex constantly upping and upping and upping prices, their prices are actually getting far more similar than they used to be. The Submariner used to be, $8,000, and this was 13, 14 grand, and now a Submariner is almost 12, and this is just a little bit more. So it really does kind of make you start wondering which one would you buy, because I mean, hands down, the Blancpain's a much better watch. It's just it's not as hyped and it's not as popular.
And somebody figured out how to do sapphire bezels, which I think has made copying it very popular. But the Bathyscaphe 50 fathoms in titanium is a lovely watch too. I've, that's on my Grail list.
Yeah. So which
It's
one?
more modern in design, but
So this is
some Blancpain seem to be worth the money they charge, and some don't.
yeah. So this is this one with the sort of syringe type hands.
Yes, that's the
that you
one.
like.
Mhm.
Nobody ever talks about this watch, but this is a
No.
mechanical depth gauge, isn't it? It's got a mechanical depth gauge, and it's got like a diaphragm in it that compresses under pressure. And you never hear of anybody talking about it, because I suppose you don't associate Blancpain with like different complications and things like that. But I remember this was a huge deal. I wonder if it actually says it doesn't even complications. Mechanical depth gauge to create the most high performance mechanical diving watch ever produced. I've seen this in a case and it's huge. But
Yeah. But,
next,
I say Blancpain is another brand that don't know how to tell their own story. The story of Blancpain has kind of been lost over time, I think, and they're there as a brand, but no one really knows what they stand for anymore.
Yeah, because when was it? Because they did they completely go under and Jean-Claude Biver resuscitated them, or I forget the story there, but wasn't there a period when they were completely dead and nobody knew about them, and then sort of in the 2000s or whatever, Jean-Claude Biver brought it back.
Yeah, I don't really know the history.
I think this is one of the brands that he bought for next to nothing. He bought all the rights to it for next to nothing, and then he revived the brand and then sold it to it's Swatch Group, isn't
Swatch,
it?
I think. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Next one up, we've got the mighty Rolex Submariner. So this again, another great year, 1953. So we had the Seawolf, we had the Blancpain 50 Fathoms, and then the Rolex Submariner. This is the James Bond one. I haven't held one of these, but I've seen a few in a shop window, a shop in London actually. Just gorgeous, and of course, still going strong today. Yeah, and these still govern a massive price as well. But I don't know what everyone thinks on this. It's called the James Bond now, but obviously it was out before. I don't know when the first James Bond film was out, but I think it was released before the Bond film. Just synonymous with that, obviously Sean Connery.
The thing that catches my eye with it, which is just funny because seeing it on a small screen far away here on my desk, if I can't read the labeling, I can't see anything there. It looks 100% like a Tudor Black Bay 58. And, I just think it's so interesting that, I know I knew the Black Bay 58 is kind of modeled on it, but seeing this tiny little thumb stamp of a watch far away, if you were to give me a trivia question, I would have said Black Bay 58 because I can't see the branding. And it really is just kind of interesting how much Tudor is doing old-fashioned homages and they're doing it well.
Yeah, looking at this, I totally see the Black Bay 58. It's really interesting. The markers are even the same on the dial. If you notice, like if you look at the Black Bay 58, they've got those circular markers, which is unusual because the Tudor design language, like with the snowflake, it had these square markers and these very squared hands. But if you just replace the hands on this with the Tudor snowflake hands, it would look pretty much just like a Black Bay 58. It doesn't have the crown guard. I don't know if this one would have had a rivet bracelet, but I assumed it would. And the gilt dial as well. And yeah, I mean, it's like dead on replica basically.
Yeah. So Peruka's backing me up here. So Jean-Claude Biver bought Blancpain for 22,000. I guess that's Swiss francs, and then sold it for 60 million. And Yeah, I think, and then he bought Hublot, didn't he, as well, or went on the board of Hublot. Okay, so and of course, I don't think that needs any introductions. We know that they still make this model today, and it's still going strong. Yeah, and their podcasters is saying that's such a good-looking watch, but you're right about the Black Bay 58. Okay, next up on the list is the Explorer. This was a surprise for me. I didn't realize that the Explorer was 70 years old as well. So they must have bought the Explorer and the Submariner out at the same time. But wow, I mean, this seems to be the darling of the YouTube community, doesn't it? This Explorer. Has anyone ever have you owned one of these, Steve or Mark? Have you owned this? I know, Steve, you've got the Explorer 2s, haven't you? Or you've had Explorer 2s.
Yeah, I haven't Explorer, but this is correct me if I'm wrong, I think it's the 1016 reference, which is like, one of the holy grail models. Everyone wants to own this version of the Explorer. And, I think obviously the claim to fame is that, Sir Edmund Hillary and Tenzing Norgay, one of them maybe wore this to summit Mount Everest. Yeah, I mean, it's an iconic piece, right? And you still see it today. You look at the Tudor Ranger that just came out, very clearly influenced by this design. It's like Tudor is going back to all these, early Rolex sport models and just pulling out the best bits that they can, for better or worse for their new models. And but this one is always going to be an icon. This is where it started, so it's a very cool piece.
Yeah, and of course, the modern version is almost very, very close to this one, isn't it? In looks and style, and so this is still a model that's kept its original appearance almost for the last 70 years or so. 70.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I'll be the polarizing one and say I just don't get it. As I said, I mean, you can't say it's an ugly watch because it's so boring. It's not ugly or pretty. It's just there. And that's kind of the thing where, I get it. It's a good size. It's a good everyday watch. But when people are just like, oh my goodness, it's so beautiful. I mean, it's truly probably the most plain watch I could think of.
Do you know, I'm gonna fight this corner for a second because my date just also is quite plain, and there's something about Rolexes. I don't know what it is, but there's just something about the way that they feel and stuff like that I believe it when. I mean, I've never owned this one, and I wouldn't buy it because it doesn't have the date. But I would definitely buy an Explorer 2 if one came available. But I believe it when Adrian at Bark and Jack and Miguel, our good friend Miguel over at SoCal Watch Reviews, when they say that this is a special watch when you own it. I fully believe that's accurate, that once you actually have it in hand and you start wearing it and the way that it feels and the way that it wears, I think I can see that. I mean, yeah, it's certainly a plain design, isn't it, from here, and there's often copied, isn't it, this as well. I know the Smiths watch, also the other one that went to up Everest, they make a very similar one to this, a modern one. But I don't know, Mark, have you ever been drawn to the Explorer?
I'm not really a Rolex person. I've tried on in years when you could actually try them on Explorer 2s, the white and the black. And I don't get these feel wonderful that everyone says about Rolex. I just don't see it. They feel like watches, and I went off and bought a Seamaster and was much happier.
Well, yeah, I'm a cynic.
They just don't work for me.
Yeah, I am a big cynic on these things. Yeah, I'm a big cynic on these things, but I would definitely change by the date, just I have to say.
But this is your, as Patrick said, your beginner's Rolex. It's the most boring design you could get. It's sort of if a 7-year-old wants to design a watch, it'll look like this.
Well, maybe it's the simplicity in design that's the key to it, I think. That's it. And I'm going to fight the corner on the Explorer one. Anyway, moving swiftly on before we upset anybody. This was another surprise for me. This is the Glycine Airman, and I'm sure, Steve, you were the first person to ever let me know about this watch. I think we might have done very, very
Yeah.
early iteration of the live stream about 5 or 6 years ago. And I think we talked about this watch.
Yeah, so I feel like this watch kind of hit its heyday during the Vietnam War, even though what year was it? Was it also 53 or what
Well,
year?
yeah,
right,
and
yeah.
the Seawolf was a big Vietnam watch as well for the soldiers.
Yeah. I mean, these are super cool, and I feel like you can get this almost this exact same model still from Glycine. I mean, obviously Glycine, I mean, you see it right there on the front page. Like they have a million different versions of this watch, but they do make a version that's called like something like the Purist, which is like a very close replica to that original watch. My biggest issue with it, and I bought one and I immediately sold it, and here's the reason why, is that it has a 24-hour movement. And if you've never owned a watch with a 24-hour movement, the hands are not in the places where you expect them to be at 10 o'clock. They're in a totally different place on the dial, and I just could not get used to that, switching back and forth. There you go. Patrick's got a 24-hour movement on a pocket watch. It's weird. I can't get used to it.
Let me full screen that one so you can talk about it. Okay. So this is
Now, if you want to see the classic, what do we set a watch to? We set it to 1020. So
show what 1020 looks like on a 24-hour watch.
So yep, here's your
10:08, I think, is the classic time.
So here's your 1020. Gobble it all up.
Oh dear.
So yeah, if you actually want your watch to smile at you, you got to set it at like 20:07. And as I said, it is kind of interesting because you're right. You're not used to it on a daily. So you look down and you go, oh, and it takes you a couple minutes. So it is a little confusing. I don't think I could do it every day, but I do like the look of it on the dial. Like I think that Glycine dial is just really cool. Could I rock it every day? No, but I do like it.
So they were originally designed for pilots, then, these 24-hour dials, because I know the Breitling, the Breitling that has the 24-hour dial was for that astronaut, wasn't it? That needed to know the time. But
that would have been 8 or 10 years later.
So what was the advantage of having a 24-hour dial? Was it just because they could do it, or did it have a functional purpose for pilots?
If it was an army watch, you'd say it's because your average squaddy can't add 12 to anything.
Yeah. I mean, in general, I would just assume everyone's talking 24-hour times. So you're saying 3 o'clock, 2200. So it just made it easier for you not to have to do the math in your head.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if this was your only watch, I think you would get used to it. And, someone posted in the comments, they love their Glycine Airman #1 Purist. And I mean, if this was my only watch, I think it would be fine. But, if you have multiple watches and you're trying to switch back and forth, it's not easy.
It would drive me crazy.
Yeah.
Or if Raqueta wanted to be totally cruel to the watch buying public, they could do a 24-hour anti-clockwise watch. Can you imagine?
So Jeremy says here, 24-hour dials are an acquired taste. I enjoy having one, but not something I'd wear on the regular. So maybe it's a bit more of a and then James Duffy says 24-hour dials also make the 24-hour bezel more natural per se. Yeah, because this has got a 24-hour bezel as one as well, hasn't it? So so another one that is celebrating an anniversary that you can still get a very close replica. And then 60 years for the Rolex Daytona. Of course, still going very, very strong. But this is the big question for this upcoming Watches and Wonders, I guess. Are they going to celebrate the Daytona? I wonder if even Rolex realized when they released this watch just that it would become the most difficult to obtain or most desired watch in the world.
Well, it wasn't a big seller when it came out, was it? It took a few years for it to take off.
Yeah.
And then for Rolex, allegedly it takes 4 times as long to make one of these as a Datejust, and they make the same profit on it. It's an expensive watch for Rolex to make because it takes a long time to make, and the margin on it is the same as any other watch. So yes, it's still in the catalog, but I don't think Rolex are ever going to increase the production because it wouldn't be as profitable as something else for them to make.
Hmm. Yeah, maybe. I mean, that's the mystery of it, isn't it? Because they never release, they never give an inch, do they, on anything to do with production numbers or anything like that. But yeah, I mean, that was the thing with the Paul Newman, wasn't it? They always say the Paul Newman dial was never a popular model at the time, and that's why they're so sought after now. But I don't know, Steve, have you ever owned a Daytona, or Patrick, have you ever owned one?
No. Never.
I would never own a Daytona.
Okay.
So, I mean, for me, it's two parts. One, I hate chronographs. So, Todd, where are you? But as said, I'm just not a chronograph fan, But I do have to say, if I had to pick a Rolex Daytona, I greatly appreciate the older versus the newer, because something about the really skinny bezel, something about the wider spacing of the three, sub dials, it just sings more. The current one to me just looks blah. And personally, I think the Zenith Chronosport is like 1,000 times cooler than the actual current Daytona, because I like the overlapping colors, and it gives it some more pop. But the current Daytona, I mean, I would be that guy that if the AD called me and said I've got a Daytona for me, I would say no, thank you.
It really, 'cause you wouldn't even. Well, yeah, I guess. Well, let's load it here, because you did make an interesting point about the Chronosport, that Zenith made almost a homage to it. But then people are saying, well, they're allowed to because they made the movements for the Daytona for so long. So they're kind of they're co-owners, or they have co-rights to the history of it. But I think this was a huge deal. And do people still talk about the Chronosport? I think they do. I feel like they do.
Well, it's a shame Pete McConville isn't on here, because he would basically say, this isn't a copy. There's only so many ways to arrange 3 subdials on a watch.
Yeah.
And refer you to his video that says copying my homework, which personally, I think the Chronomaster the Zenith is a much nicer looking watch.
Yeah. Well, see, Mark,
More exciting.
I love to argue with Pete, and I'll completely agree with him about the 3 dials, but I will say that Zenith did 100% copy the bracelet. And that, as I said, is kind of, if they just did it a little bit of their own on the bracelet, I don't think they would have gotten as much flack. Because as you said, the dial, it's just a chronograph dial. I don't even see Daytona to that dial. It's just a chronograph dial. And the case is very different. But yeah, the bracelet and the clasp, oh my goodness. Yeah, that they went to the copy shop and they made a Rolex.
You know what's strange about it, Patrick, is the fact that like Zenith has their own really sort of trademark style as far as bracelets go. They have that ladder bracelet, and they've been sort of hesitant to reuse that. I mean, you can find it on the more vintage inspired reissues that they've come out with, but I mean, to me, it seems like, why not continue that? You can continue to have that ladder bracelet in place for your new models.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a really cool look, and yeah, for some reason they just don't use it on certain models. So,
yeah, I thought this is actually their retro models, but that one comes with that El Primera they redesigned. That comes with that ladder bracelet, doesn't it? Yeah, it's interesting for sure. I quite like this. I noticed they've gone up $1,000, those Chronosport, because I'm sure they were $10,000 for the longest time. Oh, there's the Hodinky one hasn't sold out. That's interesting, isn't it? I thought, actually, maybe it has out of stock. Yeah.
Well, that one's ugly.
With the salmon dial.
And then you've got the monstrosity that's the open heart version. Zenith, why? Just stop.
Yeah, I don't know why they do this. We were talking about this on a live stream recently, weren't they? I don't know why they do this open heart. It doesn't. Yeah, it looks like the Terminator at the end of Terminator 2, where half of his face is ripped off. Or is it Terminator? Yeah, it's Terminator 2, isn't it? Terminator 1 as well. Okay, well let's get back to the article. So we've just done the Daytona, and the next one is the Heuer Carrera, and they have recently remade a model that looks very similar to this. The closest one that I found was kind of this version, which they've put the tag unfortunately on there as well, instead of just keeping the Heuer on there. But I don't know because we talked a lot about this watch, didn't we, once, Steve? Because this movement that ended up in the Sears and Roebuck watches and the Abercrombie and Fitch watches.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, Heuer was, at that time they were like a lot of other watch manufacturers, just looking to put their watches and their cases and other things into suppliers' hands. So oh yeah, we'll put Sears on it, we'll put Abercrombie and Fitch, whatever. We just need to get rid of these models, or we just need to clear inventory. So yeah, I mean, it's totally different from back then and today. But the Carrera is like one of the most iconic chronographs, I think, in all of history. Especially for a two register model. I mean, just an absolutely iconic design. And Tag Heuer has reissued this model multiple times over the years. And if you want to get the truest version of a reissue, they came out with one in the 90s that had a Lamania, I think it's the 1873, whatever, is the same movement as the Speedmaster. I think it's pretty much the exact same thing. And you can find them, and they're still, you can still pick them up fairly reasonably for around, I don't know, maybe $4,000 or $5,000. But a lot of the newer ones that have come out, which has really bothered me, they've been automatic, and the cases are a bit larger. And to me, like a classic chronograph, like what I'm wearing, it should be manually wound. It should be, maybe on the slightly smaller side. These were not meant to really be standing out. These were tool watches for professionals.
Yeah, I think this is the closest one I could find, but you're right. I've seen more recent ones that look a lot more like the previous one, but I don't know. I guess I don't know. I've just never pulled the trigger on a tag. I would go for a vintage Heuer, but it's funny. I always think about they were Sears and Roebuck, but they were under the Tradition brand, weren't they? I wonder how many people have found a watch, their grandfather's watch or their father's watch, and like, why is this got Tradition on it or Sears on it? And then they've thrown it, or Abercrombie and Fitch, and they think it's not worth anything, so they've tossed them. But those Abercrombie and Fitches still go for quite a pretty penny, don't they? If you've got a good one and you know what you're looking for.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'd never heard about that. So I wouldn't have known that there was a good Abercrombie and Fitch watch out there. That's funny.
Well, Abercrombie used to be an outdoorsman's shop, didn't it? It used to be a sportsman's brand before it became the brand. But yeah, I forget what was it called, Steve? Is it called the Seafarer or something?
Yeah, Seafarer. Yeah, beautiful models. I think Orvis also, they may have made some for Orvis as well. Heuer, obviously Orvis is still around as a outdoors, brand. But yeah, I mean, some of the early Abercrombie and Fitch chronographs from the 60s, I mean, they're absolutely beautiful. Look at that.
Yeah.
Look at those colors. I mean, you just do not see colors like that on a watch from that era. This is not the 1970s. This is like the 50s or the 60s. And these bright colors on the dial. It's super cool.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And they do go for quite a lot of money, and they have some of them have the Heuer movements in them. I don't know whether this one's specific.
That one looks like a Valjoux 72 because it's got that 12-hour counter on the bottom.
Yeah. Well, there you go. Next up on our list is the mighty Swatch watch, and of course I found the current model. They still sell this very similar watch, but I was amazed really that I'm older than that, so it's probably not a surprise. Let me add it to the thing. But I forgot to add it to the thing. I was showing this watch and then the actual modern version, which is very similar, but they've got the swatches on there. So 40 years later, the Swatch is still going strong. But it's quite revolutionary at the time, weren't they? Really, for affordable watches.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, who didn't own one? if you were of the right age in the 1980s, I mean, I had multiple ones. I'm sure you did too, and many other people, because they're so cheap, and you could customize or get them customized with certain parts, and there's so many different variations of them available. So yeah, it's an icon.
Well,
I
I
had
wasn't that
Casios.
lucky. I only had one, and I always thought my brother's was better looking than mine.
I always remember the Swatch watches as the time that they really hit big fashion was the time that they made the pop swatch, and I always remember at school people would pop them through their jump because the pop swatch was two pieces. It would clip on. It had a plastic housing that it would clip into, and you could clip it on your shirt, so the watch would basically look like it was attached to your jumper. And this was the pop swatches, and they came with an elastic band, or one of the ones that I think would snap on your wrist, the ones where you hit your wrist and it would fold round. So I always remember that being like the real thing to have, and that must have been 86, 87 when I was at primary school. And I always remember, and my mum always wore a Swatch. She always wore this black dial, this lady's black dial Swatch for years and years and years. She wore one of these Swatches. So those were the icons. I guess it's a shame that they don't really. Some of them haven't really lasted the time, have they? Because the plastics disintegrated. I had a Swatch where the plastic just completely disintegrated on it, and it just kind of fell to bits. So I suppose it's a bit of a shame, and that they can never be serviced. But yeah, amazing to see 40 years later that because I'm sure at the time there was a lot of scoffing from the other Swiss brands at the time about these plastic watches. I wonder if they thought that 40 years later they'd still be going stronger.
But it's one of two things that's saved the Swiss watch industry: the Swatch watch and Rolex marketing.
Mm.
Hold you out of the quartz crisis, even though the Swatches are quartz. But it kept interest in the Swiss watch industry, and Rolex preserved the high end.
Yeah, that's true. And Swatch, I mean, they definitely took a gamble with the bioceramic that seems to have paid off, and they even took gambles on other things, didn't they? Like the first smart car was a collaboration with Swatch and Mercedes, wasn't it? That they formed a company themselves and made the smart car. So
Yep.
Be interesting to see what they're going to do in the future. And then the last one on the list, 30 years for the Royal Oak Offshore, 1993. I'll go on my opinion on this probably last, but does anybody else have an opinion on this one, Patrick? What's your view on this one?
I mean, once again, not the biggest chronograph fan, but they've used the offshore design in the diver, and I think that's actually a pretty great watch. And if they made it a little bit smaller for us smaller wristed gentlemen, it wouldn't be something that'd be completely undoable, because you get the really pretty, bracelet with it. But, truth be told, for that price point, though, I'd buy something completely different. And, that's just the truth of it, because you're paying all that money for the finishing on a bracelet, and well, it's not going to stay pretty, and that just kills me. I'd rather pay for a complicated movement or something that's got a little bit more protected under the glass cost. But I definitely appreciate it. I think the offshore is actually probably my favorite compared to the regular, because the regular is kind of a skinny, boring dress watch. The offshore at least gives it a little bit of some personality, and they do make a couple out there that have either a carbon or a rubber bezel, and they make a tantalum version. So they really kind of got experimental with the offshore. And if they made a cool experimental one that was maybe more the diver, that somehow was half the price, maybe I'd buy one.
Yes. Yeah. Go, Steve or Matt, do you have an opinion on the offshore?
It needs to lose the Cyclops.
Right.
The Cyclops is a crime.
Well, it's interior. It's an internal one.
That's even worse. You can't take it off.
Or it's either internal or it's on the dial, but it's not. You can't feel it from the top. It's either etched into the underside of the crystal or it's actually over the dial itself. But
That's an even bigger crime. You can't get rid of it. Sorry, go ahead, Steve.
Oh, I was just going to say that. I mean, it's an icon, and I think it's an icon for a reason. I mean, it's good design at the end of the day, and I mean the fact that like this watch came out in 1993. Tell me what came out in 1993 that still looks good. All this time later. I mean, so many things look dated over time, but like this is one of those pieces that it's going to look good in 1993. It's going to look good in 2023. It's going to look good in 2053. It's just a great design. So I have no fault with it.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, we've looked at a lot of watches that have got classic designs, but yeah, I think the 90s in particular probably wasn't known for its design choices. But just the watch is saying maybe a bioceramic Swatch and Offshore collab, possibly. I've reviewed an Offshore and a Royal Oak together, a rose gold Royal Oak chronograph. And the Offshore, they are big. They are big. I actually really fell for the chronograph. It was a rose gold Royal Oak. It was a larger size as well. So whatever the largest size, maybe it was a jumbo. I think they might call it a jumbo one. But I love that Royal Oak. But the Offshore, even though I'm not opposed to bigger watches, I like bigger watches. The Offshores never really appeal to me. The other thing as well is the buttons are a rubber type texture, so they go quite shiny, and I don't know, it just doesn't. I've just always felt weird about it, but I don't. I would buy if I had the money, I would buy one of just a standard Royal Oak. I really, it was probably one of the best watches I've ever reviewed in person, other than the grey side of the moon with a meteorite dial, the Omega. So there we go, and it's a shame that they didn't put the Zodiac Super Seawolf on there as well, because that shares this 1953 anniversary with the Submariner and the.
I thought it wasn't on there.
I don't.
No, not in the monochrome.
It's not on there.
Oh my gosh! What a misstep. They included every other model. Some of the ones that I didn't even know about, but how do you not get the Seawolf on there? Because that I think that came out in 1953 along with the Blancpain and the Rolex. So that's an icon as well.
And I've been just about to release my Seawolf video, but I've been researching it, and at the time the Seawolf was similar in the same price category as the Submariner and the Blancpain 50 Fathoms, because the Submariner was like $150, believe it or not, in 1953, and the Blancpain was, I think, $90, and the Seawolf was $100. So they were in the same. They weren't. The Seawolf wasn't the more affordable version. Apparently, the Seawolf did so well at that time because it was a dive watch that was seen as being in a normal size case, whereas the Rolex and the Blancpain 50 Fathoms were seen as a larger case watches for the time. So seen as more like a professional tool watch, whereas the Seawolf was seen as more of a recreational diving watch, and that you could also wear normally as well. So it was a real pioneer of people wearing dive watches normally instead of.
And they are small. I have one, and they're like 35 millimeters. I mean, they're tiny. They're very small watches. So you can understand why, Zodiac now would want to upsize the case a little bit more and make it larger, because they do look really small.
Yeah, and the even now that this one that I got was a 39 millimeter case, so it's still very wearable. But it's amazing those dive watches like the Walbrook Skin Diver, that they were also quite small, but these were so now you think of the dive watches having to be quite large, don't you? I guess I think that's modern. It's like the pickup trucks, they're now massive, aren't they? Whereas they probably hold the similar volume to those old Toyota ones that just look like cars with a thing on the back. Okay, so let's just see if we've got any comments. If not, we're probably near the end, unless Steve, did you want to do your thing, or do you want to? You could save it for another time, or
I think save it for another time. But I've noticed the comments have been going like crazy, so I think you should should see if there are any other
Yeah,
good ones
absolutely.
in
Yeah. See, so Just the Watch, thank you so much for joining. Great channel and great merch as well. So if anybody's not been on Just the Watch channel, definitely head over there. Same with Podcastage as well, where I've lost Podcastage. But yes, check out his channel, all audio stuff. Very cool. Let's just see if we have got any comments. I think everybody's just been chatting along. Oh, actually, James Duffy said the square swatch, an old model, new model, or prototype or mock-up. Do you know that caught my eye actually? In this lineup, there did seem to be a square. Yeah, on the end there, a square swatch. I've never seen that. I've never seen one like that before. So.
I like it.
I'm gonna say that's not too familiar to me either. I mean, I definitely not the expert of old swatches, but I kind of just remember round ones and all the cool caps that went on them, because a square one would almost make it not universal, which would make it a little bit tougher for the the accessories you could get for one.
Just do a quick Google search and see if there was see if that model. Okay, so I actually did. I've just reminded myself. I did have a square swatch at one time. I had the. I had this. Actually, I'll just show it. I had a James Bond one that was like this. It wasn't this one, but a James Bond one that was, I guess, arguably rectangular rather than square. But I had a rectangular swatch watch. But yeah, that one doesn't seem to. I typed in square swatch. That's the one I had. This one, this James Bond one here. It actually flips over, and on the other side is like the James Bond. It's like a reverso, but on the back is just the James Bond symbol.
So is it truly? Did they have a collab with James Bond? I didn't know that they shared marketing.
They've done. You've probably followed this, Steve. They've done 3 or 4 sets of James Bond watches. They've done what they did. They've done one for. They've released at least 2 different versions of it. So here you go. This is the more recent one. So this was the collab. You've got Dr. No and Live and Let Die. But they did a previous one. They did this recently, this Q one. That was from a couple of years ago.
Okay,
and then they did. Yeah, they've done a previous set, which is actually where mine was from, where they did. I wonder if it was this one. Maybe it was this. No, it's not that one because mine's not on there. But yeah, look, James Bond villain watches by Swatch. So they got the villains ones, and then they did the. Maybe this was the set. Yeah, I can't remember, but they've definitely done a couple of sets of James Bond watches. Because that one that I had was a James Bond. There you go. That was from my set, the villain one. Yeah, they've done it a few times. Yeah. There you go. So that was my set. There's mine. There's the Casino Royale. I think that was the Live and Let Die one because it was like the. Oh no, that's GoldenEye. Yeah, so they've done it a couple of times. Different sets of it. There you go. Awesome. Well, that was great. Thank you, everyone, for being so active in the comments. Very enjoyable show. It was really cool to see all those watch anniversaries. We really appreciate you watching. If you've not subscribed, please subscribe to the channel. Also, subscribe to Patrick at Pocket Watch Time. And then check Mark's Instagram out. And then Steve, who you haven't got an Instagram yet, have you? Or are you occasionally upload?
I've nothing to promote.
Nothing to promote. Cool. Well, thanks very much, guys. And we'll see you on Sunday for the Sunday Social. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.